if your focus is on testing, you're going to put kids in ability groups. You're going to teach them testing skills. They haven't learned the darn thing, but they learn how to pick the best choice out of the four multiple choices by matching vocabulary. They're still not any more competent than they were before. We raised test scores by 6%. Congratulations.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guys, gals, and non-binary pals to another episode of All the Above, the show that gives you an unstandardized take on education. I'm Jeffrey Garrett, one of your co-hosts, and I've been a middle and high school principal and a high school social studies teacher. And as always, I'm joined by...
What up, family? It's Manuel Rustin, your favorite teacher's favorite teacher. I'm a high school history teacher out here in the Los Angeles area, and this, of course, is All of the Above, your home for news and analysis of all matters pertaining to our wild world of education. We are back with a full episode, and I want to give a special shout out to those of you who watch us on YouTube. Now, if you watch us exclusively on YouTube, shout out to you, appreciate you. Thank you for subscribing, thumbs up, all that good stuff. But do know that it's been a minute. It's been a minute since we've had a full episode. Now, our full episodes are video format, of course, and we have super dope guests on. And in between those full episodes, we do have audio only. We have podcasts called Passing Period. So if you only watch us on YouTube, please find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, because we do drop episodes just about every weekend, more or less. But this here's a full episode, and it's been a minute, and we want to thank everybody for hanging in there with us. This is a two-person operation, and we do what we can out here in the field, out here in education. Jeff, how you been, man? It's April. Spring has sprung. We're back with a video format, video episode. We're like on camera right now. It's different.
It is different, man. Well, it's very different. I'm happy to say that in the front yard and the backyard, actually, today and over the last week and a half, the trees in my yard, I have these three kind of dwarf trees. I don't actually know what kind of trees they are, but they have these just beautiful little pink flowers on them. And it's that little bit of change here in Southern California that reminds you that there are actually seasons, and it's just beautiful to look at, man. And the hummingbirds are coming back around. Like it's a beautiful time of rebirth, even here in the relative luxury of temperate Mediterranean climate that we live in here. So I'm feeling good about that, Manuel. And I want to say, just to build on your point in the intro there, you reminded me, Manuel, I think one of the most common things that I hear from people about our video episodes is that they use them in different types of PD or different types of professional learning kind of contexts. Right. And so, I would say go ahead also and dig through the crates, folks. You might find some good stuff. You're looking for a resource to talk through, various equity or DEI kinds of issues. You might find something in these YouTube crates that could be good for your purposes and your needs. And we've been at this for many years. So we got a good library of stuff in there, well over 100 video episodes to choose from. So, in addition to your personal edification and enjoyment, it might also be helpful to you in the context of your work as well. So just a plug.
Hey, that's a good point. I can't even tell you how many folks have sent us photos of some PD they're sitting in, some workshop they're sitting in, and the presenter is playing a clip from our show featuring whatever guest, because we've had so many renowned education experts and professors and classroom teachers and all kinds of dope folks on the show over time. So, a lot of folks have been using those clips in their PDs, or of course, using clips of us discussing headlines in education, since we do cover a whole lot that's happening out there. So yeah, folks, if you are new, definitely dig through the crates. And if you've been around for a minute, but you never went over to our YouTube to subscribe, I get it. You might not be a YouTube type of person, but we do have a link underneath this episode. It would it would be very meaningful to us if you click that link and go to our YouTube and just subscribe anyways, even if you're not really a YouTube person, just to get those numbers rolling, because our YouTube channel has been, collecting dust lately. And, we could use a little more boost in the algorithms and all that good stuff. Well, Jeff, we are back. This episode, since it's a full episode, we're going to talk about multiple stories, and then we're going to have a super dope guest, and then, some shout outs at the end. So let us know, Mr. Super Duper Dope Principal Leader Man, what's on the agenda for today?
Well, Manuel, as usual, we got a good one for everybody, and the 112 episode streak of having only the dopest guests in education remains fully intact. And I know some folks out there might have been worried, but we're back and we brought a good one with us. Today, we're going to be digging in with just an absolutely fascinating guest. He is a nationally and internationally known speaker, thought leader, expert on issues relating to professional learning communities and adult culture in schools. It is Dr. Anthony Muhammad, who's going to be digging in to these important issues with us, and also talking to us about his new book. You might recognize Dr. Muhammad's name if you have ever attended one of the Solution Tree PLC at Work institutes that happen all across the country every year. He is a keynote speaker, award-winning, legendary school administrator in the state of Michigan, and just someone whose ideas, perspectives, thoughts, I think are going to really just be fascinating to dig into today and really help us unpack this discussion around the, in some cases, perhaps thought of as like a controversial word in education, that being PLCs. We're going to dig into all things PLC today and adult culture, all that good stuff. So stick around, folks. It's going to be a great conversation. You definitely don't want to miss it.
All right. Sounds dope. Sounds dope. But as always, we first start with our Do Now, taking a look at recent news and headlines in the world of education. That's coming up next. Stay tuned. All right, folks, it's time for the Do Now. Let's see what's going on in the world of education. Let's see what's going on in these education streets. Jeff, how are we going to do the Do Now today?
Well, Manuel, today we're going to do the Do Now in a format that I think it's fair to say is front and center on the minds of all educators in these post-pandemic times, Manuel, where chronic absenteeism remains a major barrier for us all. That is, we're going to take a little attendance today, Manuel. We got a roll call.
All right, roll call. I keep hearing about this absentee crisis and all that. So let's see who's actually in the building today, Jeff. And the first name on our roll call for today actually is teachers. Teachers, Jeff.
Just all the teachers. Is that,
all of them.
Is that the idea? Every single one? How many teachers are there in America? For some reason, off the top of my head, I want to say it's like 700,000, but I feel like that's totally wrong. I don't know why I'm thinking of that number.
Yeah, that's
okay.
I mean, I have no idea. I want to say I've seen the figure before. At least I've seen it reported in terms of how many teachers are part of this union and that union. But yeah, that's a good question, Jeff. I'm sure somebody out there listening has the answer. But let's talk about these teachers, Jeff. Of course, in recent passing periods, we talked about how much money is owed because of these teachers and learning loss. This is not about that, though, Jeff. This is about how teachers are feeling right now, about the profession, about being teachers, Jeff. And this story here has to do with a new report recently released by the Pew Research Center based on a survey conducted among teachers back in October of this school year, October and November of this school year. So October, November 2023, not 2013, 2023. All right. So this report detailed the results of an online survey of 2,531 U.S. public K-12 teachers, which was, like I said, conducted back in October and November. And among the findings of this report, of the survey, I should say, the Pew Research Center found that teachers today express, spoiler alert here, low levels of satisfaction with their jobs. In fact, they're much less satisfied than U.S. workers overall. Now, specifically, the report details that 77% of teachers say their job is frequently stressful. 68% of teachers say it's overwhelming. 70% of teachers say their school is understaffed. 70% of teachers say their school is understaffed, and 52%, so just over half of teachers out there or who responded to the survey, say that they would not advise a young person starting out today to become a teacher. So 52% say they would not advise a young person starting out today to become a teacher. Now, in terms of academic performance and the behavior of students at their school sites, 48% of teachers, so just under half of teachers, say that the academic performance of most students at their school is fair or poor. A third say it's good, and only 17% describe it as excellent or very good. Now, in terms of behavior, about half, 49%, say that the behavior of most students at their school is fair or poor. 35% say it's good, and 13% say it's excellent or very good. Now, in terms of challenges that their students are facing, poverty cuts across the urban-rural divide with roughly equal shares of teachers in urban districts, 62%, and rural schools, 60%, saying that poverty is a major problem among their students. In suburban schools, a smaller share of teachers, 42%, say the same. So, Jeff, there's a lot in this report. We'll link it below because, there's pages and pages and pages of data from this report. We just pulled out some of the, higher level, bigger headline grabbing pieces of data here. But what are your initial thoughts on this report from the Pew Research Center?
Yeah, Manuel, I am fascinated by this report, and I'm fascinated on a few different levels. So one is just sort of like high level, national headline level. Clearly, we are not doing enough to make the work of being a teacher in this country sustainable and fulfilling for educators. So that's the first kind of layer that stands out for me. And education being, even the folks in our society who honestly don't really care very much about people, at least will say that education is like a fundamental social institution, that we need to guarantee equal opportunity, and all these sorts of American dreaming kinds of things, right? And it's very clear that the sort of culture, the quality, the professionalism of teachers is being threatened in some ways. And I would say it's also very clear that the pandemic has had a corrosive effect on some of these things, and we have not taken virtually any steps collectively as a country to mitigate against those negative factors, right? It's more expensive to live almost everywhere, and maybe actually literally everywhere in this country now than it was. Teacher salaries were already low and have not kept pace. Student emotional needs, behavioral needs, we know have heightened in some important ways. And school funding is now being cut across the country because of the ending of the federal, COVID relief funds. So we are looking at continued escalating needs with fewer resources, right? So we have these kinds of factors that show intense need in one of our bedrock social institutions, and yet we are going to be investing less in the way of resources into those institutions. So that's kind of my top level. But to dig a bit deeper into this, Manuel, I think it's also exposing one of the sort of core tough realities of what it means to be an educator in this country, in a society that outsources the problems it intentionally creates by fostering a racially unjust and class-based type of oppressive system, outsources the costs of upholding and maintaining that kind of system onto schools. It also outsources those costs onto some other social institutions like policing and prisons. But schools are maybe, in theory, and maybe hospitals in some, low-income rural and urban areas are also the places where we, sort of say like, oh, take care of these things. And what we're being told by the educators is that that's not working particularly well, that it's creating unsustainable conditions for them, and that they are recognizing that poverty is, and of course the intersections of poverty and race that are so rampant in this country, it is creating conditions that are making the profession unsustainable. And I say this, Manuel, with full knowledge, full knowledge that it is a slippery slope to go down the road of conversations in our profession about things that we don't really have agency to control, right? Because that can easily lead to well, we don't have to do anything to get better in our work. We'll just blame the parents or blame society or whatever, right? So I want to stipulate that up front and say, I'm not saying we don't continue to do good work internally and grow and get better. But I am saying that by far, the major challenge that we face as educators is the stuff around the school that is making kids come to school in a condition in which they are either outright unready to engage as learners or struggling so much with basic needs like safety and love and some of these kinds of things that they are in need of those things being addressed, and the school becomes this sort of surrogate parent type of figure in those kinds of ways. And so a few of the data points that I did want to call out here, Manuel, one of them was 91% of educators said that poverty was either a major problem or a minor problem in their schools. 91% of the educators that they surveyed. And to scratch a little bit deeper on that, when we looked at teachers who work in high poverty schools and what they say about having to address like serious behavioral issues in classroom. In high poverty schools, 67% of teachers said they have to engage in that on a daily basis. And 33% of those educators said they have to help students with mental health challenges. Okay? So, and those numbers are significantly higher than they are for educators who work in lower or medium level poverty schools. So I think what we're seeing here, Manuel, is the intersections of societal poverty, of societal racism, and all the ripple effects that those things create in every other social system in our country: environment, healthcare, food, housing, etc. And that all landing on the lap of educators who now have an incredibly difficult job that we could argue is even more difficult than it was prior to the pandemic, because as a society, we have not only chosen to uphold a deeply racist and classist society that we have pretty much always upheld, but in the face of exacerbating challenges, we have not risen to the occasion to actually properly resource the communities around the school so that families are in a better place to send their kids to school with stability and the ability to come to school ready to learn. Oh, and by the way, now we're cutting billions of dollars in education funding across the country at the same time as all the costs have gone up for everything. So we are not only just literally cutting, but we're cutting in the face of higher costs. And so those cuts are going to be even more sort of draconian in terms of their effect on schools. So this is what I'm taking away from it, Manuel. It saddens me that this is where we are, but also, of course, I'm not particularly surprised. But these are my takes. Very curious as one of the potential survey respondents in this report from Pew Research, what your take is.
Yeah, well, you shared a lot of facts there, and of course we love facts here on All the Above. And I would just add to that I mean, for me, I'm a little conflicted because on the one hand, I know that it is extremely challenging these days for all the reasons that you mentioned and all the reasons detailed in this report. It's extremely challenging to be a teacher these days, and it's very important that teachers continue to share their experiences and their struggles and the challenges of being a teacher these days. It's very important to sound the alarm because we need support, we need a response. But at the same time, when the alarm is sounded, and we get headlines, we get survey results like this, I feel like we see reports in a similar vein every once in a while detailing how challenging it is for teachers right now. When that's not met with like a policy response, when that's not met with some sort of action to actually rise to the challenge of supporting teachers, then it's dangerous in the sense of continuing to add to the very real narrative that teaching is extremely difficult right now and dissuading more folks from ever even considering becoming a teacher. So, on the one hand, I love all the every opportunity that teachers might have to express their experiences in the teaching profession right now. But I do worry that the more of this is highlighted, the more that this gets highlighted, the more that we are dissuading our younger generations, younger folks from even considering being a teacher. So that's why I'm a little conflicted, because, one of the details of this report is that the majority of teachers, a slight majority, 52%, say that they would not recommend to young people to be a teacher. And although I understand that, that's very real, that's also very dangerous, because we really need good people to enter the teaching profession. We really need good folks, and we can't. I don't know. I'm worried that we are going to have such a shortage, a growing shortage, and especially as folks retire, as folks leave the profession for various reasons. If we don't have a robust teaching force coming in, especially one that reflects the diversity of our students and all that. Oh man, it's going to be even tougher. It's going to only get more challenging to be a teacher. So I really worry about that. I definitely work with some folks. They might be listening to this right now who are very open in saying that they tell their students to not be a teacher. They tell their students to, how low the pay is, and you don't want this for yourself. And that really bugs me. That really bugs me, because we need wonderful folks to come into the teaching profession, and my students are wonderful. And I tell them all the time, yes, it is an extremely difficult profession to enter, especially in the early years with regards to compensation, and especially with regards to certification and all that. It's extremely difficult, but it is also extremely fulfilling. One part of this report that came out showed that the majority of teachers, despite all the things that, the stress, the challenges, the mental health challenges of students, there's a whole section on cell phones and all that, despite all that, the majority of teachers still say they find their job frequently or extremely, I forget the exact word, I think it was frequently or not overwhelmingly, but there was some strong term there of how fulfilling it is, even with all the challenges, how fulfilling it is. And I know sometimes we lean on that too much to excuse the lack of compensation, to excuse all the other challenges, yeah, but it's fulfilling, it's fulfilling. I know we can't lean on that too much, but it is also very real. Myself, these last two school years, I know I'm in the minority on this, but I've really love these last two school years. They've been two of the best school years for me in terms of just fulfillment and how I feel when I leave and go home each day. I know that's not the reality for a lot of teachers out there, but it is a reality for some of us. This isn't all bad. There's, for every negative part of this, for every 60% say it's too much this or that, well, there's the 40% for whom it's working. And I think we could really hone in on what's working for them specifically, what's being done at their schools and their districts that are creating these experiences or these these bits of data here, and how can we lean on that and how can we build that up. So yeah, just overall conflicted. I love being a teacher. I really love it, and it hurts me to see this kind of data come out. It's very real data. I acknowledge all of that, but I just don't want to be beaten down on the profession so much so that we sabotage ourselves with regards to building up the next generation.
Yeah, I hear that, Manuel. Just very briefly in closing, I would say, could you imagine a world in which this kind of data comes out and the response is from a president of the United States, from, various committees in the Senate and the House of Representatives, from governors, from, county officials or mayors across the country to say, you know what, we're going to take on the challenge of making the teaching profession the most desirable profession around.
Man.
Right? We're going to take on the challenge of making it a great thing for kids to grow up wanting to become an educator, for our brightest minds to say, you know what, a great use of my intelligence and my brilliance would be to help cultivate the next generation of thinkers and leaders and learners and heads of household and et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And so imagine that world, well, in a just society, in a society that was truly rooted in some version of communal love, right?
Yep.
One would expect that would be the response to this type of data. And I think what you just named is even more urgent in the face of the fact that is almost the exact opposite of what we experience from political leadership in this country.
For sure, man. I've said it so many times. Like, if we held up the teaching profession the way we hold up military service, the way we hold up policing, like, man, like I go to a hardware store and there's like parking there for vets, and shout out to all the military vets out there for sure. Where's the parking for teachers, man? Like, if we held up teachers in the same regard as we hold up other folks within our institute, within our society, like, man, that would go a long way. But unfortunately, we know that's probably not going to happen, especially anytime soon, especially now. I mean, if anything, it's just more attacks on teachers for all these, all these political, partisan, bigoted reasons. So, yeah, man. But Jeff, man, we got another name on the roll call for today. It's not just teachers in the building, so we should probably get to that one. So, who's up next on our roll call?
Well, Manuel, the concept that's up next on the roll call is Algebra II, your old friend, Algebra II trig, Manuel.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. So Algebra II is where I lost my interest in math. Personally, I know everyone has their own math stories about what math did for them, this and that, whatever. Man, I flew through math. I used to love math. In my particular high school at the time, I had geometry as a freshman, and I loved it. I just loved everything about it. And then, went to Algebra II and was like, yeah, no, I don't like this anymore. And that's where it all ended for me. I mean, I went on to calculus and all that, but like, I just did not enjoy it. So, are they on the roll call because, like, I don't know, are they absent now? Are we going to celebrate their absence maybe? I don't know.
Well, that is an excellent question, Manuel. And if the sort of doomsday sayers out there who are worried about a new trend developing in math are right, then Algebra 2 could be on its way to being absent from the curriculum for many high schoolers across America. But of course, also, this could be an overblown concern. So let's get into it, Manuel. This story is a fascinating one. It comes to us by Javarius Salman. I hope I am pronouncing that person's name correctly, in the Hechinger Report. And this story actually came out in early March, so about a month ago. We're just catching up on it now. But California has been at the center of a heated debate over what math knowledge students really need to succeed in college and careers. With math scores falling slightly nationwide, some educators have argued that the standard algebra-intensive math pathway is outdated and needs a revamp, both to engage more students and to help them develop relevant skills in a world increasingly reliant on data. At least 17 states across the country now offer data science, which is an interdisciplinary field that combines computer programming, math, and statistics as a high school math option. But some have decried a move away from Algebra 2, which they argue remains necessary for students to succeed in STEM careers. In California, that disagreement erupted first in October 2020 after the state announced it would allow students to substitute data science for Algebra 2 to help more students qualify for college. Math professors, advocates, and even some high school educators argued that the state was watering down standards and setting students up for failure in college. Then in July of last year, the state reversed its earlier decision and in February released new recommendations reiterating that data science courses cannot be used as an alternative to Algebra 2. The actual reality of how this will impact a college admissions is currently still unclear, and additional guidance is expected here in the state of California in May. So much more to come, hopefully very soon on this, Manuel. But I think this is a fascinating debate because the kind of experience that you just named for yourself is part of the genesis of this idea around considering a shift in the traditional math curriculum and moving away from the sort of purely abstract notions of many higher level math courses, at least as they're often taught, to something that's more immediate, practical, real world ways in which students need to understand math and data and statistics in order to be literate in this world. And so, Manuel, what's your take on this?
Yeah, well, this is a conversation that's becoming bigger and bigger here in California. I'm sure it's affecting other parts of the nation as well. And as I said, Algebra 2 was where my identity as a math-loving person fell apart. It just fell apart. And, I think there's this big divide among folks, clearly, as articulated here in this article, about the traditional mathematics path that in California has encourage the quote unquote higher achievers to basically like go on this path through calculus and then into the UC system. And those who say, that's not necessarily the best path for everybody. And that path, which has existed for a very long time, doesn't seem to really be working out for a whole lot of folks, as evidenced by, math scores, if we want to point to that. So like, I find this very interesting because I'm one of the ones who was marched through calculus and then ended up being a history major and not using Algebra II or calculus really ever again. But data science, like that stuff is everywhere. I mean, what we just talked about this, data coming out of the Pew Research Center about the teaching profession. I mean, data science is right there in terms of like your ability to interpret that data, analyze that data, and make conclusions about that. I think that's relevant to far more fields than Algebra II and calculus. I think. I will admit, I am a history teacher. Most of my courses right now are ethnic studies in particular. I'm not a math person because I blame Algebra II for destroying that love of math that I had. But in any case, I fully understand that those folks who know more about mathematics in particular, know more about the STEM fields, that they know more about this particular issue than I do in terms of like the usefulness of Algebra II versus data science. I fully get that. But I think we can all agree that there's not one best path for everyone. And if somebody intends to enter particular majors that are not related to the STEM fields, I don't see why data science is looked at as like a watering down. If anything, that's preparing somebody for a useful set of skills that will much more closely align to their future careers than Algebra II and what comes next, it seems like. So there's that. And I also want to say, whenever conversations like this come out about like what students need and a watering down of stuff and they're going into college and this and that, whenever those college professors start speaking up, and there's college professors in this article here talking about, students and if they don't have Algebra II, that's going to hurt them for this and they need to know that. And there's no Algebra II type of course in the college system. So where are they going to get those skills and this and that? Whenever I see that, whenever I hear professors like, well, I teach this in the math part in the math department at such university, and I am the one here to tell you that students need this. It irks me in a way because we could flip it, and I, as a high school teacher, as somebody who deals with adolescents every day, could point to your pedagogy at the higher ed level and say, look, I'm the expert in connecting with students and helping them learn, whatever type topics. And I could tell you that what you're doing at the university level, sitting behind your lectern and just lecturing at them for 2 hours, is not working, is not useful. So it irks me when you get some of that, like, well, I'm an expert, so let me be the one to tell you. I don't like it coming from university folks because too often they are not receptive to listening to the education, the pedagogy type experts on what they need to be doing to reach their students better. So that just irks me out. That really has nothing to do with math. That's just, it grinds my gears when I see professors talking like they're just like the most expert on this particular topic and we need to listen to them. Oh man, that could go a lot of different ways. So that bugs me.
Yeah, I hear you on that, Manuel. I do feel a certain sense of moral responsibility in this moment to say to you, Manuel, that we are all math people, okay? And I think the fact that you said that, though, is actually brings up a really good point, because I think what's buried or interwoven, let's say, into this debate around things like data science is this idea of math identity for students. And math, I think, is somewhat unique in the extent to which we talk about it like you just talked about it, in ways where people say like, well, I'm not really a math person. Like very few people, if any, would say like, well, I'm not really a reading person. At least in the same way that we would say that about math, right? Like we look at being illiterate as, and I'm not saying this is the right way to frame it, but we look at illiteracy among adults in this country as like a shameful thing, right? Like people try and hide that, they're ashamed of it. And we got people who boldly flaunt like, well, I'm just not a math person, so I don't be doing them numbers and stuff, right? And I think that like that is a very real issue that we need to take on, because the reality is your numeracy and your literacy with math, so to speak, is as important a fundamental skill in order for you to be a sort of educated member of the citizenry, for you to be a full participant in society. And as you also mentioned, Manuel, that is in nowhere more important, I feel, in the larger curriculum than it is in social studies, where students are confronted with all kinds of like historical data sets, timelines, graphic depictions of data and, electoral maps and all kinds of stuff that relates to policy decisions, public ballot measures that they're going to vote for, the sort of operation of our so-called democratic society. And students are absolutely not strong enough, I would argue, in their mathematical skills. Too many students are not, in order to be really literate participants in those kinds of discussions. And so, to me, the question that's being raised here is, what is our purpose with math education? Is our purpose to produce all graduates who can pursue, higher level STEM fields? Personally, I would say no. I would say a component of our purpose is to make sure that students who want to pursue those fields have the opportunity. But I would argue that a greater portion of our purpose is making sure that students have the sort of foundational skills, which I would argue really goes through like Algebra I and maybe a portion of geometry, to say like, in order to operate in the world, and honestly some component of statistics as well, but in order to operate in the world and understand math as it exists in the everyday ways in which it will be presented to you on the daily news or in the newspapers or in articles online, ways in which you confront it in your own life, budgeting for yourself or thinking about interest rates or, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, there's just the larger world of data and data science and how data is used and represented to make arguments and advocate for things in our society, at work, in politics, etc., that we need students who can be skillful and literate in those things. And that doesn't mean Algebra II is useless and has no value, but I support frankly, the expansion of the math curriculum to include more of this kind of stuff that I think honestly is just more relevant. Now, a component of the relevancy might also have to do with what you're talking about, Manuel, which is we have a pedagogy problem with math instruction, as we do in many other areas as well. That's not unique to math. But I think, it is certainly, from my perspective, worth the effort for us to open up the curriculum and to stop pretending that all students are going to become engineers, because that's not real, nor is that actually like a good thing for, for society. We certainly need students to become engineers and, all the STEM trades, but we also need students to do lots of other important things in the world and be literate in the sort of foundational stuff you need in order to be an empowered participant in our society. So I support this shift. I hear the calls against it. I get that, but I think this is fundamentally a good thing from my perspective.
Yeah, man, I agree. And I also think at some point we have to have a conversation about this phrase watering down, because it seems to pop up whenever anybody is pushing for change to a outdated system that has not worked for too many groups. It's always a watering down of things. And what do we even mean by watering down, especially when it's an effort to make education more just and more successful for folks of all different backgrounds? So at some point, we're going to talk about watering down and what folks really mean by that. But in any case, we're out of time for today's Do Now. We have a super dope guest in the building. Coming up next in our seminar, we got Anthony Muhammad here to talk to us about professional learning communities. All right? You don't want to miss that. Stay tuned.
Hey folks, thanks so much for tuning in to All the Above. We really appreciate you. And as you know, All the Above is a small operation. It's just me and just Manuel, that's it. We have no sponsorships, which means we are totally dependent on our amazing audience to help support the show. So here's what you can do. Go to our website, which is aotashow.com/support. That's aotashow.com/support. There you can find links to everything you can do to support the show. You find all the links to every platform that we're on, where you can like, subscribe, follow. Make sure you share our show with your whole network. Also, you can donate there. We are on Venmo, We're on Cash App, and most importantly, you can find the link to our Anchor page where you can become a monthly patron. Even a small donation once a month will make a huge difference in helping us continue to produce the show. Lastly, you can find there the link to get your flyest, best, latest, all the above show merch. Okay, all you gotta do is go to aotashow.com/support. Thanks, enjoy the rest of the show. All right, folks, welcome to today's seminar. Thanks so much for joining us. And we are absolutely excited today to have with us an amazing guest, Dr. Anthony Muhammad. We told you a bit about him at the start of the episode. He is here, and we're going to be digging into just some fascinating issues today around professional learning communities and adult culture in schools. Dr. Muhammad, thanks so much for joining us here on All the Above.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate everyone who has downloaded or who is listening to this podcast. I thank you for your time and your attention, and I'm honored and flattered that you would even care about what I have to say. So I'm honored to be here.
Well, we appreciate those kind words, and we are more than interested in what you have to say. And folks, let me tell you a little bit more about our guest. Dr. Anthony Muhammad is the author of numerous books and an international thought leader as one of the world's leading experts in the areas of professional learning communities and school culture. He has been honored by the Global Gurus organization as one of the 30 most influential education thought leaders in the world in 2021, 2022, and 2023. Not sure what's up with these folks in 2024, but maybe they'll get around to it.
The 2024 came out already. I was on that list.
Ah,
there we go.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, there we go. Appreciate that.
Number 4.
Yeah.
4 in a row. There we go. Well deserved. Folks, you may recognize Dr. Muhammad if you've attended any of the Solution Tree PLC at Work Institutes across the nation, where he is a regular featured speaker. Dr. Muhammad was an award-winning middle school teacher and an administrator for nearly 20 years in Michigan and is author of the new book, hot off the press, The Way Forward, PLC at Work and the Bright Future of Education. Welcome again, Dr. Muhammad, to All the Above, and I'm going to kick it over to Manuel for our first question.
Yeah.
That's good.
We got some professional learning community dopeness in the building. Thank you, Dr. Anthony Muhammad, for taking time out for being here on All the Above. We know you are a very busy person. Some of my colleagues recently saw you speak at the Educating for Careers conference up in Sacramento, here in California, probably about a month ago or something. So we know you've got a lot going on, especially with the new book. So thank you again for taking time out to be here. And now you've written and spoken about PLCs, professional learning communities, for a very long time. And you've done a lot of work in pointing out what schools and districts get wrong about PLCs. And specifically, you've written about PLC Light, this PLC model that we see in too many schools where nothing fundamentally changes about their structures, but schools engage in book clubs and call their department meetings, PLC meetings, and nothing fundamentally changes about the actual instruction happening in the classroom. So what is it that makes it so hard for schools to change their culture and do PLCs the right way, especially considering the benefits of professional learning communities?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of culprits involved. I don't think any one person or one factor makes that challenging. So I'll kind of break down. I'll start with kind of comprehension of the process. The term professional learning community has been around a long time. And I'd like to give your listeners kind of a history, and that might lend to why there may be some confusion. The whole concept of learning organizations started with the research of Dr. Peter Senge in his book, The Fifth Discipline. And he referred to the most progressive organizations he studied as learning organizations. They're collaborative, and they take their various gifts and talents and they work as one unit. That some of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Thomas Giovanni then took that concept and applied it to education, but he said he didn't like the term organization. He felt our mission was more as a community. So it morphed from learning organizations to learning communities. Then Shirley Ward and Milby McLaughlin, both very brilliant educational researchers from Stanford, felt that it'd be great to sit around and have really ethical conversations. But the real purpose of collaboration within a school is to improve professional practice. So they coined the phrase professional learning community. The gentleman that I am the protege of, Dr. Rick DeFore and Robert Aker, took that research to a different level, and they coined the phrase professional learning communities at work. Their question was, what would people do collaboratively within an organization that would actually improve student learning? And they structured, and probably the best manifestation of that is the book Learning by Doing, where they outlined 6 very critical collaborative efforts that educators would engage in if in their collaboration they were to improve student learning. They look at learning through the lens of we as opposed to me. I call it moving from a me mentality to a we mentality, breaking down the walls of isolation, that they would work in collaborative teams, that they would, in those teams, clarify guaranteed and viable curriculum, unit by unit, target by target, course by course, that they would actively engage in gathering evidence through using common assessments, but using them formatively as opposed to summative. And then they would create a multi-tiered system of support or an intervention system that responded to the evidence that they had gathered about student progress towards those essentials. And they would learn from that process to improve individual and collective practice. So some of the confusion is that some people just misunderstand how the work has evolved over a number of years. And what many people would call their PLC is more closely aligned to what would be called a critical friends group. And there's nothing wrong with a critical friends group. These are people that get together periodically. They focus on some things that are important, but it doesn't necessarily affect student learning. They have organically developed conversations around things that they're concerned about, whether it's student behavior or the use of technology. It's just not strategic enough and organized enough to really guarantee or reduce the uncertainty of improving student learning. So there's a lot of different culprits, but misunderstanding is a big one. And to assume that because people get together and they're professionals, that they're actually acting as a learning community that's improving professional practice. And that's why DeFore and Aker in their evolution of the work was very clear. And my new book addresses, if a school is serious about that, this is what you would do to move from concept into actualization.
Yeah, Dr. Muhammad, you mentioned there the issue of common formative assessments, and I'm hoping to dig a little bit more deeply into that with you because, I think it's fair to say that depending on the context, talking about assessments can be controversial in our field, and I think it's very important for us to explore perhaps the differences between what you mean when you say common formative assessments and what we generally mean when we talk about assessments in education. But there's a quote from your book I wanted to share, which goes that we need to, or you propose, pardon me, in the book, that we make a critical change for our profession to stop focusing on achieving acceptable test scores simply to get a favorable rating by the powers that be, and to instead focus intensely on making sure that each student masters the small set of absolutely essential learning outcomes in every unit and course. Now, I'm wondering if you can go a little bit more deeply around that with us and talk about what does that actually mean in practice, and how is a focus on common formative assessments and professional learning communities in the way you were naming different than some of the other kind of reform types of efforts that many educators might have experienced?
Okay, thank you. Well, one of the things I address in the book is what I call self-inflicted wounds. And our adult anxiety about student performance on test scores has really caused us, because we don't want to lose, we want to save face, we want to look good. test scores really have nothing to do with kids. It has to do with the pride of the district, the pride of the school, the pride of the community to say that our institutions are better than yours. And what does that drive? It drives a greater polarization in segregation. We've seen test-based accountability racially and socioeconomically segregate schools more now than it was before Brown versus Board of Education. It's driven real estate values. It's driven perceptions about schools and school systems. A lot of these are self-inflicted wounds. As I go about my business when I'm writing or presenting, I never think about how I did on a standardized test. I never think about what grade I got in class. I'm able to live the life I live because of the skills, the intellectual dispositions that were developed, my critical thinking, my ability to analyze and find answers that are not apparent. Those are the things that make an educated human being. So, though there's nothing wrong with students doing well on a standardized test, that should not be the primary objective of an institution. Learning is, and here's the assumption. If I can help you two gentlemen learn critical content, think about it at deep levels of cognition, apply it in a real world context, my bet is you'll probably do better on a standardized test. But if my goal is, how do we create shortcuts so that you get better standardized tests, but you still can't think deeply? You don't have any resilience, no cognitive stamina. You don't know how to critically analyze problems and innovate or apply it for utility. Then what have I done? I just made a test taker. So one of the things I'd like your viewers to consider is to transition or change our language from assessment to evidence or feedback. So if I'm teaching you gentlemen something, let's say I'm a coach and I'm teaching you a new play in basketball. I want to run some backdoor cuts. Obviously, the coach demonstrates to the team what he or she wants them to do, and they practice it. And the coach analyzes that evidence in real time and does what? Provides direct support. They make adjustment, and they do it over and over and over until the team understands all of the critical nuances of that new offensive play so they can execute it within the context of a game. Band directors do the same thing. They have 100 kids. They give them a task and they practice and they refine it and they do it. They don't give them a grade or a formative evaluation on every aspect of the feedback that they get. They use it to help the students that they're instructing get better at the mastery of the task that they're asking them to do. And they do have summatives. The summative for the basketball team is that game on Friday. The summative for the band director is the football game or the band festival. But how many formatives, how much feedback did that band director get in helping 100 kids? Think about how magical it is. 100 kids playing different instruments to be flawless at the end of the process. How many times did the kids get a chance to mess up, reflect upon their mistakes? So what I'm really imploring core academic teachers to do is to think about your task from a mastery perspective. PLC question 1 is about defining the objective. Marzano calls it a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Define what it is you want kids to do. The basketball coach has an idea. And then what? Gather evidence frequently on their progress and then move into direct intervention or intervention in real time to help that young man and young lady improve until what? They can demonstrate the clear task that you set before them. All I'm saying is, if we take that as our dominant paradigm in American education, wouldn't kids at some point do better on these little cheesy standardized tests? So the focus isn't on testing. The focus is on learning. And what we've learned is if kids learn more, they tend to do better on testing. But if your focus is on testing, you're going to put kids in ability groups. You're going to teach them testing skills. They haven't learned the darn thing, but they learn how to pick the best choice out of the four multiple choices by matching vocabulary. They're still not any more competent than they were before. We raised test scores by 6%. Congratulations. But they can't apply it. It's not meaningful to them. Formative assessment or gathering formative evidence is one of the greatest paradigm shifts that American teachers can have. And quit grading everything that moves and know the standardized tests aren't the end of the world. They're one piece of evidence in a whole sea of evidence, but it's what you gather on a daily basis and how you respond that is what really matters. You can tell I got a little passionate about that. But just some stuff we just got to stop doing.
Yeah.
And people know it innately, and they stare at me like, "Well, what do we do?" Then stop. It's like we're driving off this cliff that everybody can see, but we're wondering, well, how do we stop? Hit the brake. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I know that's going to resonate with a lot of our audience, because our audience tends not to be into raising test takers, that's for sure. And our audience also very much is passionate about equity and challenging racism and oppression. And you've spoken frankly about our equity and justice imperatives as educators. And in your book, you give a brief history of some of the lenses of discrimination that have built structures and barriers to young people attaining quality education. So, race, class, gender, ability. And oftentimes when discussions are had about equity and justice, in my experience as a high school teacher for 20 years now, those discussions tend to be separate from the discussions around professional learning communities. So, we're wondering, in terms of how you see the connections between the work in addressing our legacy of oppression and really addressing the equity gaps that remain in education, and the work of building and establishing robust professional learning communities. What connection do you see there between the two?
Great question. I like to differentiate between social justice and equity. Equity is a concept that should be at the root of every progressive and productive organization. It's actually right in the Declaration of Independence. We say we believe that all are endowed with certain unalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So there's a standard, all, and what are we expecting them to have? Quality life, to live in a liberated environment, and to have the opportunity without interference from the government or others to pursue happiness. That's been a process that's been developing over well over 240 years. But it's a concept. And equity means, in its rawest sense, and I'd advise your readers to go get one of my colleagues, Ken Williams' book, Ruthless Equity. And I've also written about this in a book called Overcoming the Achievement Gap Trap. Equity work is very, very specific. And it means if in algebra, there are critical learning outcomes that every student must attain, what can we do as teachers to provide them with clear understanding of what those targets look like, provide valid assessments to give us feedback on where they are, but more importantly, when we get the feedback, how do we respond? That cuts through race, social class, gender, sexual orientation, income. If I say that all of you have to learn this Pythagorean theorem, it's that important. Define what that is, teach, gather evidence, and then make adjustments based upon need so that we can guarantee when you leave here equitably that all of you leave with a deep understanding of the concept of Pythagorean theorem, which is essential in algebraic understanding. That's equity. Some kids need extra time, some need extra support, some need to be taught in a different way because of their cultural orientation. All of those things become subject of the collaborative team in shaping how they address their needs. And if you look at the data from your assessment and see that males have greatly underperformed on this target, then we ask the question, why are boys doing poorly? Was it our pedagogy? Did we not, was it our instructional material? Because whether you're a boy, girl, whatever you call yourself, when you leave this unit, you must understand Pythagorean theorem. That's equity work. Social justice work is about deconstructing long held uh, uh, disruptive policies, structures, practices, like a policy that discriminates based upon hair texture or disproportionately targets kids of poverty because you can't get a new book until you pay your book fine. And if my parents are solidly middle class, that's going to be easier for me to get justice from my school because my parents have more disposable income than yours. That's social justice work. Social justice work and equity work, they complement each other, but they're not the same. So equity work doesn't require you to protest or to push back against the board. It's being better in my equitable practices to make sure that the kids that I serve, every single one of them get what they need. And we use feedback and evidence to guide our practice to make sure that nobody matriculates to Algebra II without what they needed in Algebra I and geometry. That's equity work. And it applies to white kids, it applies to Black kids, it applies to Latino, it applies to Indian. It becomes inequitable when we see from our evidence that certain students have been underserved by the basis of the expression of their understanding or their knowledge. Then we may go back and ask, how do we adjust our practice to address this trend? But so don't confuse social justice work with equity work. They complement each other. And if both are, protesting that there isn't equitable representation in the pictures on our wall, won't necessarily help a kid in Pythagorean theorem. But it will ensure the kids in their environment see more equitable representation and they see themselves, but it may not specifically help them with Pythagorean theorem. So equity work is a lot more concrete than people like to, and it becomes comfortable to just discuss issues and never change practice.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, Dr. Muhammad, I think it's fair to say that in one way or another, just about every educator in this country has experienced various types of efforts to change practice. Now, some of those efforts might be, failed reforms. Some of those efforts might have been, the right thing to work on, but the conditions were not right. But folks have, sort of experienced the efforts at changing practice, and you have written and spoken extensively about some of the cultural challenges, especially the adult culture challenges surrounding these efforts to change practice. And in your new book, you also talk about some of the kind of exacerbating effects that the pandemic has had on the conditions around schools, the expanding outcome gaps for student groups as a result of the pandemic. So I wonder if you can kind of, considering all that, tell us a bit about your advice to folks who are working within their school or within their context and wanting to change practice, wanting to really create true PLCs, as you've been naming here, but feel like they're running into barriers or feel like they're sort of swimming upstream and running into some of these kind of adult culture challenges.
Okay, thank you. A couple of universal truths I'd like to establish before kind of getting into how do you accelerate the pace of change. And number one is that change is challenging, it's disruptive, and it's uncomfortable. But the other universal truth is improvement is connected to change. So I've written that Everybody loves improvement. I don't know a teacher in America who, if their kids did better, wouldn't be happy. But what's not always attractive is the sacrifice and the discomfort you have to go through in your routine to make that happen. So a third universal truth I'd like to add to that. So the first one is change is difficult, but improvement is impossible without it. But the third is what motivates a person to engage in that discomfort is dissatisfaction with the status quo. You only feel comfortable or energized to address an uncomfortable change if the benefit is worth the discomfort. And I've written about this extensively, and I want to challenge your viewers with this. We become too comfortable with failure. We almost expect it at a certain level. That when we think about all kids, we don't really explicitly think about all, we think about most. Here we talked about test scores and school accountability ratings. As long as most of our kids are doing fine and the volume of failure isn't at such a magnitude that it makes us uncomfortable, we have a threshold for accepting failure. Teacher by teacher. Hey, 80% of my kids did well. Well, if you're a parent, are you okay with 80% of your children as a parent being fulfilled? You're just going to discount the one child that didn't do well and you're going to celebrate with your other children? Like, come on. There's a Chinese proverb that reads, a parent is only as happy as his or her saddest child. So as long as the unfulfilled potential of human life, and I'm talking about children in this case, is okay with us, then we'll look at change and say, it's bad, but it's not bad enough for me to change. Change is uncomfortable. But I like to implore upon leaders that good leadership can create the conditions where people are more likely to engage in the discomfort of change if you put them in the best position. So Dr. Luis Cruz and I wrote a book called Time for Change. And in that book, we outline 4 critical leadership behaviors that we, from our research, had found put teachers in a more advantageous position to say, okay, it's uncomfortable, but I'm willing to do it. The first is better communication. We find that teachers become reluctant with change if they don't clearly understand from an intellectual perspective why formative assessment is better when it comes to improving student learning than summative. If I come back and I say, we went to this conference, we heard Tom Schimmer, or we heard Dylan Willem, and we're going to go to more formative assessment. Come on, guys. If they don't have the intellectual insight about why gathering evidence formatively, as opposed to gathering it and processing it summatively, is better, your enthusiasm doesn't become contagious. But if they know that when students are assessed and is used as pure feedback, with students given an opportunity to recover, and the staff engaging in direct intervention based upon that feedback, it has a 0.9 standard deviation impact, which is over 2 years worth of growth. If I do it, if I understand that, I say, whoa, you mean I can double the rate of my students learning if I use evidence formatively more often than I do summatively? That may be uncomfortable, but heck, who doesn't want to sign up for kids doubling their rate of learning? If that's not properly communicated, you don't have a meeting of the minds. You have a misunderstanding. And misunderstanding leads to resistance. The second characteristic is the ability to build trust. So, Jeffrey, you might understand why formative assessment doubles the rate of student learning when used properly, but you might not trust me. Why? Because I'm your 4th principal in 2 years. We've jumped from Marzano to Hattie to Lucy Calkins. You just have whiplash And it's not that you doubt the validity of the potential of the change. You get it intellectually. Your issue is emotional. You don't trust me. So the ability to build strong, humane relationships, that would make you, even if you don't get it, if I can prove to you that I'm trustworthy, you'll do it not because it makes sense. You'll do it because you trust me. So the ability to build trust, Dr. Cruz and I call a connection of the heart. Communication is a connection of the mind. Trust is a connection of the heart. You know, I will never ask you to do something that's not beneficial because I'm ethical, I'm empathetic, I'm humane, and I'm trustworthy. The third skill is the ability to build capacity. So, Manuel, you get why it's important. You trust me, but here's your dilemma. You don't know how to develop a good formative assessment. Your issue is more practical. It's skill based. So it's not that you're like protesting because you don't want to do it and you don't get it. It's not that you don't trust me. You don't know how. So administrators who are able to be real instructional leaders and equip their teachers with the professional learning, resources, and support they need, because Manuel's gap is a skill gap. And what we bank on is that if he knows how to do it, he'll do it. Those three are the highest leverage leadership strategies we know of. Better communication, strong relationships, and very strategic professional support. How many teachers do you know that if they knew why something was necessary, they trusted their leadership in the institution, and they knew how to do it, wouldn't do it? But there's a small group that I like to call the over my dead body people. They get all of that. The only thing that works with them is a demand. So the last leadership skill is that if you provide all of the support that people need to change, you've communicated, you've built trust, you've built capacity and infrastructure. The last skill is the willingness to hold a line of accountability, that people understand that this wasn't a suggestion. This is what's expected. And you do that by creating a culture of feedback and peer pressure. People have to know that this is serious. And for the worst case scenario, the willingness to use authority for those outliers who get it, but feel that they're special and it doesn't apply to them. The message has to be to them, if everybody else is accountable, so are you. And we found when you do that, they'll either take advantage of the support you've given them and engage in change, or they'll leave because the culture is not conducive to their irrational and illogical behavior, which everybody can see is antithetical to the development of children. So that framework in Time for Change I actually summarized in the Way Forward book so that you can see it in context. Leaders have an obligation to put teachers in the best position to change. And most teacher resistant to change is a result of poor leadership.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And actually, our last question before we get you out of here. And again, thank you for taking the time out for being here. And new book, The Way Forward. Y'all could find the link to that underneath this episode. But we want to talk to you briefly before we get out of here about school system leaders. So the superintendents, the board members, elected officials, and what expectations you think we should hold or have of them in this work to continue to allow educators and students to thrive in their schools.
Okay. Well, in Learning by Doing, which is a handbook for PLC, in the third edition in chapter 10, the whole chapter is dedicated to district leadership and teacher collaboration and professional learning community process. I would first advise district leaders to read that chapter. I mean, if you have the book, read it. Chapter 10 is speaking specifically to you. And Janelle Keating has also written a book about district-wide professional learning community and central office and the obligation of central office, which goes much deeper into the concepts outlined in the old edition was chapter 10. In the new edition coming out in May will be chapter 11. We've added a chapter to learning about doing. And there's a continuum for district leaders to use. There are 5 critical behaviors for district leaders in ushering and leading change for PLC, but I like to address a couple. One is coherence, and 2 is a common language and expectation. So when I say coherence, you can't implement professional learning community central office and then have other district requirements that contradict that. Let me give an example. Between the first 2 requirements of a collaborative team, which is PLC question 1, which is guaranteed and viable curriculum, the team needs some flexibility to determine unit by unit what every student must know and be able to do. And then PLC question 2 is the formative assessment piece. How do we know if kids have learned? Well, there's a vacuum between those 2. If we set learning targets as a team, and our next step is to evaluate kids' progress, then instruction has to happen between those 2. In professional learning communities, we don't prescribe instructional practices for teaching. We believe that's a part of the action research portion. So let's say Jeffrey is a guru in technology, and Manuel, you are a guru in cooperative learning strategies. We have the same target with the same depth of rigor, but we entrust teachers to use the pedagogy that they believe is best for their students, and we come back and test that theory at the formative assessment level. If I prescribe for every teacher, every method, every resource, then where's the variation for action research to test best practice? And we started using this term fidelity, which is antithetical to the action research portion of the PLC process. So how are you telling teachers you want them to act as professionals and to have some experimentation around critical practices, but then you have administrators walking through the classroom with a tablet, micromanaging every part of their instruction? That creates a conflict. Either you allow teachers to make mistakes and grow and share good practice among each other. If I use a method and it doesn't work, that's not fatal. Because if Jeffrey's way worked well, now I just added a tool to my toolbox. Where are we going to correct that at? At the intervention stage. And who's probably best on that target to that intervention? That's going to be Jeffrey. Because Jeffrey's technology tool showed great promise. And then next year when I teach that target, now I have a better practice in my toolbox. So that's why the PLC handbook is called Learning by Doing. Teachers need the latitude to experiment, make judgment, make some mistakes, and then adjust those mistakes. But if you tell them you want them to engage in PLC and then micromanage every part of their practice with junk science around this misconception of fidelity, you can have micromanaged robotic teachers and strong collaborative teacher teams simultaneously. And that is a mistake we see central office making all over the country. You can't do both simultaneously. Either you're going to have faith in your teachers or faith in Houghton Mifflin or Pearson or McGraw-Hill. You can use those as resources that teachers can in their toolbox. But if your faith is in some linear, multi-million-dollar literacy package where you're basically making teachers robots to that practice, then why do they need to collaborate? Just give them the tools and say, we're going to micromanage because our faith is in the tool. Our faith is not in you. If you tell the teachers, our faith is in you, and these are tools you can use as you organically work together as teams for students to demonstrate mastery of these essential learning targets, then teachers will feel empowered. They'll feel engaged. They'll feel efficacious. You can't outsource efficacy. And district offices are trying to do it in the name of raising standardized test scores all over the country. And it's led to an epic teacher shortage, record lows in teacher job satisfaction, and pessimism at every district and most campuses around the country.
Well, Dr. Muhammad, very much appreciate you sharing your words and your expertise and your thoughts with us today. I think everyone who's watching and listening can be left with probably several nuggets and things to push their thinking about their own practice and their own leadership at their school site or in their context. So again, just want to thank you for joining us today. Before we let you go, for folks who maybe are just newly getting exposure to you here, or who want to sort of follow up with you and your work or learn more about it, where can they find out more about Dr. Anthony Muhammad?
Great. If you want to interact with me on a more frequent basis and just kind of get in my orbit, social media is a good place to start. In Facebook, I have an author page under Dr. Anthony Muhammad. On X or Twitter, whatever they call them these days, it's at New Frontier and the number 21, at New Frontier 21. And on LinkedIn, it's under Dr. Anthony Muhammad as well. If you're looking for a resource or professional development, Solution Tree's website is the best place to go, which is solutiontree.com. All of my books are there. All of the events where I'll be speaking are there. And all of my other resources like streaming video and DVDs and my associates. My website is under construction, which is newfrontier21.com. That should be up sometime in mid-May, back up. But solutiontree.com is fine to find a resource or for services or, reproducibles from the book. They do a really good job providing multiple ways for people to engage with my work. So those would be the best ways.
Okay. Folks, you heard it here. We'll have some of those links below as well. But Dr. Anthony Muhammad, national and internationally known expert on professional learning communities and school culture, thanks so much for joining us today on All the Above.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that's it for today's seminar. Thanks so much for joining us. But stick around. Next up is our class dismissed. All right, folks, we've come to that time in our episode where we like to pause, give some thanks, give some props to folks out there in the world of education doing good things. And today we have a celebration of someone who is doing incredibly good things. They're getting recognized for it. And just want to give a shout out to a former All the Above guest, Juliana Urtubey, Miss Earth, who had a tweet earlier this week giving some love. She, of course, was the 2021 National Teacher of the Year, and giving some props to the 2024 National Teacher of the Year, who Manuel is going to tell us a little bit more about. Manuel, who we got today?
Yeah, for sure. So, we like to give shout outs during this class dismissed portion of the show. So we definitely want to shout out this year's National Teacher of the Year. So second grade teacher from rural Tennessee. Now we are going to quote heavily from the Associated Press write-up about this National Teacher of the Year, the write-up by Travis Lawler. And the second grade teacher in rural Tennessee who's been chosen as the 2024 National Teacher of the Year. Her name is Missy Testerman. And Missy Testerman has drawn accolades for celebrating differences among her students while emphasizing their shared humanity over decades of teaching in Appalachia. Testerman has a special affinity for children of other cultures who comprise just a fraction of the 650 students at the pre-K through 8th grade Rogersville City School where she works. And that's why after 30 years of teaching first and second grade, Testerman got an endorsement to teach English as a second language back in 2022. Now, Testerman said in her finalist application that it seems at times that state legislatures across the country are passing laws that do not address the actual problems in education. She's quoted in this piece as saying, schools had to hire someone to scan every book in the building under the guise of the pornography. That pornography is lurking in the kindergarten classroom, yet we do not have funding to hire a behaviorist to help with the kindergartners who are disrupting classrooms every day. Part of this dilemma is our fault. It is time that we educate those who make policies that affect our students. Actually, that was from her application in the to become National Teacher of the Year. So shout out to her and shout out to all the other educators out there, especially, I mean, it sounds like, Jeff, I mean, you know, I don't know too much about the Tennessee geography, but it does sound like she might be in an area that perhaps is impacted by that right-wing nonsense, the shenanigans out there. And here she is speaking truth to power and making sure that her students are seeing the article details support that she provided for one of her students who was new to the country from Egypt, and how pivotal her involvement was with the student and the student's family. So, you know, shout out to her and all the other educators who are out there doing the good work, fighting the good fight, especially in areas where it's not, I mean, it's never easy to do the good work and fight the good fight, but in some areas it's even more difficult than others. So shout out to Missy Testerman.
Indeed. Big props to Missy Testerman. Congratulations on this incredible honor, and also props to you on a career of great work in those early education or early elementary classrooms out there in Tennessee. So hats off to the 2024 National Teacher of the Year. Folks, that is it. We are at the end of today's episode. This is our first full episode in a little while, so we appreciate everybody who has made it here with us all the way to the end of the episode. Thank you for joining us, and you could do us a little bit of a favor because we need your support. All the Above is a two-person operation, so if you enjoyed today's episode, please click that thumbs up. Give us a 5-star review. Make sure you're sharing this episode with colleagues, friends, family members, folks who might enjoy it or find it interesting in whatever way would connect with them. We are greatly appreciative of you helping to spread the word here about All the Above. And if you'd like to support this show, we are a two-person operation. We have no, permanent sponsorship here, but you can support All the Above by going to aotashow.com/support. That's our website, aotashow.com/support. There you can become a monthly contributor. You can buy some AOTA show merch, get your Teach the Truth t-shirt, a mug, whatever suits your fancy there. But any contribution would be helpful. And we are incredibly grateful to all of our All the Above show family members out there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.